Hey there, friends. Quick question for you. Would you say that today's teenagers are more mature or less mature than they were years ago? But first, guys, go check out my friends at CMMG. They're at cmmg.com. You're going to find a ton of different things, not only fully assembled and complete rifles, but you can also find some of the most reliable parts kits on the market. I've been using their parts kits for 10 years now. They have clearly some of the best parts kits, accessories for your AR-15, for your own home builds. They also have really cool mystery boxes. You want to check those out. I just got my second mystery box in yesterday. Check those out as well. If you use my code FTATF, again, FTATF, you will get 10% off of whatever you purchase at cmmg.com. So use my code FTATF and get 10% off today. The Newark City Council voted a couple of weeks ago to grant voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds for school board elections only. The measure, sponsored by Council President LaMonica McIver, passed unanimously. She declared that minors had the right to representation. She said, "We support expanding our democracy." Those are her words, not mine. She's too stupid to realize that this is not a democracy. "And giving our young people the right to vote." Once again, we're dealing with stupid people. You know, let's get rid of this assumption, false assumption, and most of us know this already, that just because you're elected to a position, somehow you have any kind of real sense to you. The measure declared that 16 and 17-year-olds deserve the right to vote. Here we go. Because they may take on certain responsibilities like driving, paying taxes, and working in civil activities such as political campaign contributions, volunteering in campaigns and at the polls, and attending political rallies. So by that rationale, if I can clean a wound and put a Band-Aid on a cut, I'm a doctor, so I should be paid what doctors get paid and have all the same rights. Let me write you a prescription because I can dress a cut. I'm a doctor now. Following prolonged and divided public remarks over the measure, Councilman Lawrence Crump remarked that minors today were capable of voting because they're, quote, much more mature, much more advanced than he and his peers were in their youth. Well, Lawrence, I'm just going to call you Larry. They might be more mature and more advanced than you because you clearly are an idiot. So I would expect some people, if you're a blooming idiot now, you probably were a blooming idiot back then. Probably more of an idiot back then than what you are now. So maybe this is true for you, but I can promise you this. And statistics, studies, and literally every single other measurable thing proves that you are factually incorrect. Children are not much more mature, and they are not much more advanced than their peers. And to back that up, how do you explain this? In a recent study, psychological research confirms what every parent knows. Children, including teenagers, act more irrationally and immaturely than adults. According to many psychologists, adolescents are less able than adults to perceive and understand the long-term consequences of their acts, to think autonomously instead of bending to peer pressure or the influence of older friends and acquaintances, and to control their emotions and act rationally instead of impulsivity. All of these tendencies affect a child's ability to make reasonable decisions. Are you ignoring all of this data? Because it didn't take me long to find it. Councilman Dupree Kelly said that granting certain voting rights to minors was critical to ensure a healthy democracy. Here we go again, miscategorizing what we are as a society, and indicated that granting voting rights in school board elections was just the start. It is absolutely just the start. This is where it starts. It seems harmless at the local level, at a school board level, because all they're dealing with was education, which, I mean, that's already been ruined anyway by the federal government, but it seems harmless. This is that pinprick. This is eating the elephant one spoon at a time. It happens because, we learn to accept it. Our minds start to get used to it. Kids already vote in school board elections. Let's let them vote in mayoral elections. Next thing you know, they're voting for president. Councilman Patrick Council said that struggles with systemic racism and social justice had culminated in the measure. Council said that allowing minors to vote would help mitigate societal issues like gun violence. So wait a minute. letting a 16 or 17-year-old or letting 16 and 17-year-olds vote in a school board election will somehow mitigate gun violence? How in the world do we make that kind of a jump? Unless what we're talking about is we're talking about being anti-gun. Because let's face it, when the wackos on the far left talk about gun policies, they're talking about banning things. So while we know that letting a 16 and a 17-year-old vote in a school board election will have nothing to do with gun violence, maybe it helps to shape the narrative and start to, if nothing else, mold their brains and brainwash them into thinking that there really is a thing as gun violence. Instead of looking at all violence as a whole, maybe this is their way to brainwash these idiots in their school system at 16 and 17 years old to think like they think. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out. First of all, they're mind-effing young people and everybody else. You notice how littered throughout this article, different people are using the term democracy. You notice how the mainstream media and politicians on the far left also use democracy. They float the implication. Some of them may be too stupid to know that we are not a democracy. Some of them may know that we are a constitutional republic and just say democracy to get people thinking that we are. Now, why does that matter? Why does the modeling in the brain matter whenever we are trying to convince people of certain things? Well, first of all, the wackos on the far left have made no bones about it that they intend to, or would like to rather, barring a constitutional convention or a state convention, that they would like to undo the Electoral College. They want a popular vote. They don't want the Electoral College vote. The Electoral College is embedded in the Constitution. You cannot just vote it out. You cannot just pass a resolution. You can't, with the stroke of a pen as president, get rid of the Electoral College. But this is a way that these people are starting to rewire the brain into thinking that we are a democracy, so that when people get older, they're thinking, well, I thought we were a democracy. Well, we should be a democracy, not a constitutional republic. And of course, they're associating democracy as being good, Republican as being bad. This is a way to divide. But the main thing is to mind F the people into thinking that we're a democracy all along, so that whenever it comes time to support undoing the Electoral College to allow us to be a true democracy, they'll say, well, yeah, we should have been all along. That was my thought all along. What are we doing as a constitutional republic over here? Even though we have lasted for all these years as a constitutional republic, and we've done just fine. Knowing what a true democracy could do to this country is not a good thing. Your mind does not want to go there. We do not need the big cities in America deciding what all the rest of America needs. That's not the way it works. Our forefathers were absolutely brilliant and foresaw what these people are talking about now. Now, how does this apply to allowing young people to vote? I looked it up, and out of all the people in Newark, only 5,408 voted in the last school board election. Again, 3% of Newark voted in the last school board election. There are currently 38,000 students who would be eligible to vote if they were to pass a law to allow this. That's 7 times more voters than who voted in Newark's last election of only 5,408 people who voted. Now, granted, if only 3% of that new 38,000 voted, that's still 1,140 new votes being cast in this election. So no matter what, you would have a significant increase in voter turnout. Now, where's the danger in this? Well, you're going to get a lot of people to vote, because what if they could vote for, with the school board, let's say, I don't know, a candidate who comes in and says, now we're going to only go to school 4 hours a day and 3 days a week. And we're also going to include in our budget free candy bars for anyone who's taking a break at lunchtime. Guess what? You don't have to take math anymore. Sounds kind of crazy, right? If you allow things, you cannot undo those things. If you allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote, and you have a candidate that comes in with ridiculous things in a particular area, if you have 38,000 new voters, remember, only 5,400 voted in the last election. If you now dump 38,000 new voters into that, It will be a landslide win when that crazy wacko school board candidate proposes all these crazy things, because if you only had 5,400 people show up last time, the 38,000 are going to show up. Believe me, they're going to show up. But clearly the students are going to have a vested interest. They're voting in something that directly impacts them. Now, that's the way the voting system should work, right? You vote on things that will have a direct impact on you. But the school-aged brain is not capable of making those types of decisions. Again, they are not more mature. You can say things all the time. It doesn't make them true. You can say the sky is green. It doesn't make it green. It's still blue. We can see it. We see the young people today. They live in their parents' houses for longer. Half of them don't want their driver's license. We would have given our left nut for a driver's license at their age. I know school-age kids whose parents bought them a brand new Jeep and it sits parked in the driveway because they have no desire to go get a driver's license. And that's not just one. A lot of my friends' kids don't want to go get their driver's license. You remember what it was like to get you? It was a rite of passage to go get your driver's license. They don't care now. These kids are way less mature than what they were before. And you want to know another reason why these kids are not capable, and it's not just today's children, even the children of old, back when we were younger. We were not capable of making these decisions. I know I sound like I'm dumping on today's children, which are dumber and less mature. But even back in our day, we weren't mature enough to do that. We weren't mature enough because psychologically, biologically, we were not at the point where we could make the same types of decisions rationally that we do as adults. In fact, young adults in many cases are not capable of making those decisions. You hear about people all the time saying, I was a liberal or I was a Democrat until I got older and got a job and realized that I wasn't a liberal Democrat. Because you get into the real world and you realize I made stupid decisions back then. I actually point out the development or the lack of development in the human brain in my book, How to Make a Monster. On page 60, I state the average baby's brain doubles in size in the first year after birth. It grows to about 80% of an adult size by age 3, and then 90% in size, nearly full grown, by age 5. The human brain pretty much completes maturing in physical size during adolescence. But critical developments within regions of the brain continue to take place well into a person's 20s. And actually, it's 26 is where they say the human brain is fully developed. The development of the prefrontal cortex, a very significant part of the brain in terms of social interactions, is blossoming all during a young person's life. The prefrontal cortex affects how we regulate emotions, control impulsive behavior, assess risk, and make long-term plans. More specifically, the orbital cortex, the part of the prefrontal cortex located just above the eye sockets, and the ventromedial prefrontal cortex is also continuing to develop during this time. This area of the brain controls inhibition, social behavior, ethics, and morality. In the next paragraph, I go on to give an example. Have you ever wondered why children are so impulsive and can make such bad decisions at times? Well, the reason is pretty simple considering their brains are still years away from maturing in these critical decision-making areas. Again, while a young person's brain may be physically mature in size, it is absolutely in its premortal stages of development both naturally and with direct input from their immediate environment early in life. And then when you go on to look at the high percentage, actually 30% of people in this age group we're talking about are medicated with these mood-altering drugs. Look at page 66 of my book where it says, according to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the impact of prescription drugs can be particularly disruptive and harmful to developing child's brain and body. In almost every instance, the doses and indication for psychotropic medications are based on extrapolated adult data. In a nutshell, this means that the young people's brains might be physically mature, but there are still things as far as decision making that are way behind in maturity. Again, the number is 26 years old that I've read in various studies that say that's when the brain is done developing as far as decision making and things like that. And we're allowing people to vote at 18. They're wanting these 16 and 17-year-olds to vote. We're also, as according to these studies, over a third of our young people are medicated with these mood-altering drugs. So we are rewiring their brains while they are still developing. So we are creating people out there and giving them disorders at a very young age by giving them these black box warning drugs and the problems that come along with them. And clearly these local politicians in New Jersey, some of them apparently think just the way I do. It's funny how they will make a choice based on what benefits them. Critics assail bill to require parental consent for kids to use social media. The measure would require social media companies to verify all New Jersey users' ages. Under the proposed legislation, anyone under 18 would need to get parental consent and verify their parents' age within 2 weeks. So you're telling me that you think these kids are mature enough to vote, but they're not mature enough and they're too stupid to make the simple choice to download the Facebook app on their phone and use it accordingly. Again, too immature to use Facebook, but mature enough to manage a billion-dollar budget. And if we're going to stay on the topic of age, New Jersey Assembly advances bill raising firearm purchase age to 21. So your kids are responsible enough to vote on things, and again, using their terminology, to vote on gun issues. But they're not responsible enough to handle a gun. You are literally saying, in your own words, that these children are more mature than children back in the day, that you think they should be able to vote and they should be able to have an impact on gun-related issues, but you think they're too immature to have any access to guns. The ultimate goal, and this is not all about the Second Amendment. I'm not trying to make this just about the Second Amendment, but it will affect the Second Amendment. Because if they are able to get to a point where enough young people can vote and they can brainwash and bribe enough of these stupid young people to vote their way, then there could be a state convention, a constitutional convention. That's how, obviously, you're going to undo certain amendments, including the Second Amendment, and of course the Electoral College. That's how you would do that, to put up an amendment to undo that Electoral College. The Electoral College, the Supreme Court stacking, and the Second Amendment are the three holy grails of the wackos on the far left. If they can get enough people who are gullible and stupid enough to vote how they tell them to vote, they can accomplish some of these things. This may seem like not a big deal, because who cares about Newark, New Jersey? We should care about letting these kids, these children, these non-adults, to vote in adult elections. It's not my responsibility to worry about the feelings of a 16 or 17-year-old when I vote in a school board election that is involving a billion-dollar budget. These children can't count pocket change when they go buy a taco at Taco Bell. And you think they should have some kind of input on a billion-dollar budget at even the school board level? Give me a break, people. It's time we wake up and put an end to these things that seem really innocent on the outside, but they have very, very devious consequences, and the intentions are even more devious.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
He's so horrible!